This morning, with it being a holiday, I will endeavor to keep my words somewhat short. And I want to touch upon a theme that we feel at times is worthy of the repetition. And I want to launch right in this morning. If I were you, have a Bible open, and I would turn to the book of Exodus, chapter 20. A little bit of context: when the Lord delivered his people from slavery in Egypt, an event known as the Exodus, he did not immediately bring them into the promised land. And though he never endeavored for the journey to last 40 years, he did pause in the midst of that ancient journey to take some time to instruct his people. And specifically, he took the time to teach them how to live before him in covenant, in relationship, through what is commonly called the law or the law of Moses. Now, for those who may not know a little bit of history here, the law given by God through Moses contained some 600 plus regulations that were meant to inform and influence the worship, the lifestyle, and the morality of his people. And at the heart, or at the cornerstone of this law, was what we call the Ten Commandments. And when you read through Exodus 20, you actually see the giving of these Ten Commandments. And I think it's wise not to think of the Ten Commandments as the exhaustive list of what's required of God's people, in a sense, but rather I think it's good to view it as a bedrock, or to view them as the bedrock upon which the superstructure of their ancient faith and practice was built. And I want to just take a moment to answer the question, what are the Ten Commandments? And if I were you, this is something that I think is worth memorizing. I think it's really a summation in a lot of ways of what the entire Bible teaches regarding how we should live. It's a good place to start, at least. Number one, if you look at verse 3, I'm going to move very quickly this morning. The Lord speaking, that you shall have no other gods before me. The second commandment, found in verse 4, forbids the making of an idol. You shall not make for yourself an image or an idol for the purpose of worship. If you skip down to verse 7, the Lord prohibits the using or the misusing of his name, in a sense, in vain. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Skip down to verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Skip way down to verse 12 now. Honor your father and your mother. The sixth commandment, found in verse 13, you shall not murder. The unlawful taking of a life is forbidden. Verse 14, the seventh commandment, you shall not commit adultery. Verse 15, you shall not steal. The ninth commandment, found in verse 16, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor, basically forbidding deception. And finally, the 10th commandment, found in verse 17, you shall not covet. And if you read it in context, it's forbidding that spirit of envy concerning your neighbor, your friend, your co-workers, possessions, relationships, and beyond. Now, again, these 10 are certainly worth the memorization, but if you begin to look at the 10 commandments, we see something rather interesting. That out of the 10, the opening 4 regulations really establish how we are to relate to the Lord. They identify what our vertical relationship is to be about. The forbidding of other gods, the forbidding of idol worship, the forbidding of misusing his name, and the proper place of maintaining a Sabbath. Each of those 4 commandments have to do with how we relate to God as individuals and as a collective community of faith. But the next set, really the last 6 commandments of the 10 really deal with how we relate to one another. And I make this point a lot, that the Lord places tremendous emphasis, not just how we relate to him, but on how we relate to one another. And if you look at these, honoring your mother and father, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, and so forth, each of these really deals with how we relate and what our obligations are one toward the other. Now, if you dig a little bit deeper, and I want to hone in now on that second block of commandments that govern how we relate to one another, I want you to consider the opening commandment of that block, specifically the 5th commandment that's found in verse 12. If you're at home, what does it say? It says in verse 12, honor your father and your mother. Now, if I were asked to craft a legal code that was meant to govern and regulate how a society is to function. If I was to, in a sense, write a constitution, to write a Bill of Rights, to write some code that was meant to inform and impact how we live, I don't think that I would place the command to honor your mother and father in there. I would certainly include things like don't kill, don't steal, and beyond. But to put honor your father and mother in there seems a little bit interesting to me. And it's the first one that God opens with. Before he forbids murder and theft and beyond, he establishes this principle of honoring your father and your mother. Now again, if it were me, if I were writing the code, I wouldn't include it most likely, and I certainly wouldn't put it first in this place of preeminence. But this is where the wisdom of God really surpasses our own in a sense, and there is a purpose to its placement. And I want to share this with you, that a people who learn to properly honor their parents are far more likely to honor God and establish a society that is free of murder and theft and broken homes and beyond. In other words, if you show me a nation, show me a country where fathers and mothers are universally and properly esteemed, and I will show you a country or a nation where vitality abounds. But on the other hand, if you show me a nation where dishonor in the home is rampant and tolerated, you will find all manner of brokenness in such a people. This morning, we cannot overstate the importance of the nuclear family as it was designed by the Lord. And I want to say something very strong here, but I mean it when I say that the unraveling of the family leads to the unraveling of a nation. And I want to put forth this morning that many of the woes, the horrors in a sense, that we are experiencing as a nation, I would put forth stem directly from the breakdown that is evident in our home. And not just the breakdown of the family unit, but now the redesign of God's original design. And I put to you this morning that now more than ever, we need a dramatic return to God's design and the practice of biblical honor. So on this Mother's Day, I call you to consider and to embrace the commandment and the wisdom of God to honor specifically, in this case with it being Mother's Day, your mother. What does it mean to honor your mother? If you're at home and you're taking notes and you came across this command to honor your mother in Exodus 20:12, how would you begin to interpret that? Now, we really can't pause, as this is a live stream, to give you some time, but I want the wheels of your minds to begin to go down that direction. What does it mean to honor your mother? You know, it's tragic that we live in a generation where very few things are honored or deemed sacred. We don't model honor, we don't teach honor, we don't expect honor, and we see precious little of it in our society. So what does it mean to honor something? Well, a simple and summary definition is this. To honor something is to esteem or to reverence a thing. And specifically as it relates to mothers, to honor your mother is to esteem or to reverence her. Now, if you are a child in the sound of my voice, and you live under the care of a mother, your obligation before God is to obey and to submit to your mother, that parental figure. That is your role, to honor her, to listen to her, to yield to her, to consider what she has to say, because it's her job and her role assigned by God to cultivate and to raise you up in the fear of the Lord. Now, if you're an adult who's moved out, you have your own place, your own family potentially, you still have obligation to honor your mother. It doesn't shut off, in a sense, when you turn 18 years old or whatever age you move out. To the adult child, the idea of honoring carries the idea of respect, kind regard, and appreciation. So we have obligation all through our lives to show honor to our mothers. God has established that as a priority in his kingdom and for his kingdom people. And this morning I want to just give you a few very brief points for the sake of time concerning our obligation to honor our mothers. The first point is this, and I've touched upon this in years past, but it's certainly worth the reaffirmation. If you're tuning in for the first time and this is your first time hearing, these points, I invite you and I challenge you to take them to heart and to allow them to impact how you regard and how you view and treat your mom. The fifth commandment is a commandment, point number 1, that we must follow. We must honor our fathers and mothers. A very obvious point. I'm not going to linger long here because I've already spent some time talking about the danger, societally in a sense, of not honoring our parents. Realize that when God says honor your mother, and I'll just single that one piece of the passage out, it is not phrased as a suggestion. You can read a variety of Bible translations, and every single one of them convey the idea that what the Lord was saying through Moses is phrased and was phrased and will always be phrased as a commandment, not a suggestion. It is not optional. You will not find a translation that says, it'd be swell if you honored your mother and your father. Or I'd really appreciate it if you honored your father and mother. No place does the Lord say, I strongly suggest, or I highly recommend that you honor your father and your mother. But rather he simply says, in a commanding way, honor your father and your mother. And I think it's worth noting, though it would take a bit more time to explore this, that obedience to this command in particular, and it was a command, is something that Jesus embodied. Now, we just came through the Good Friday, the Easter season, and I want you just to consider briefly something that Jesus did while he was hanging on the cross in an act of reverence and love and honor for his mother. He ensured, as the eldest son, that his mom would be cared for when he was gone. Don't turn there, but listen to John chapter 19, starting at verse 25. While Christ was crucified, it says the following: near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Now when Jesus saw his mother there, and just imagine the heartbreak of that woman who is watching her son killed in the most gruesome of fashion. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby. Most commentators believe that's the Apostle John specifically. He said to her, "Woman, where is your son?" And to the disciple, speaking of John, "Here is your mother." And from that time on, this disciple took her, speaking of Mary, into his home. What we see is that even Jesus, the Son of God, the Lord of all, still submitted to the commandment of God, and he embodied reverence and honor for his mother, even though he's king of all. And if that's how God the Son acted in relation to this ancient commandment of God, how much more should we honor our mothers? Now, I do realize, and it's tragic to even have to touch upon this, that it's quite possible that many in the sound of my voice have a broken relationship or connection with their moms. And if that's the case, my heart truly goes out to you, because this might appear to be something incredibly difficult or almost impossible to embrace. How do I show honor to someone that has been so cruel or abusive? We live in a broken and damaged world. But I would still say that even if a vital and abounding and healthy relationship isn't possible at this time, you can still show her honor in the way that you talk about her, and refer to her, and regard her. Because even if she didn't prove very life-giving in life, in a sense, you are still alive because of her and the role that she has played. And in that way, you can always show your mother particular honor. So number one, we must honor our mother. Number two is we should. We should honor our moms. It should transcend mere commandment. It shouldn't just be something that we have to do, but something that we realize really ought to be done. I want to just share a few verses with you. Again, if you want to turn there, you can. You don't have to at times, but I want to read just a portion out of the book of Proverbs, chapter 31. I don't think it's possible to preach a Mother's Day sermon without referring to Proverbs 31. And I want to just read this to you very quickly, very briefly. And I want to put forth the question, in light of all that our mothers do for us, all of their tireless and sacrificial service, how can we not properly honor them? Proverbs 31, starting at verse 10, it says, "A wife of noble character who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. Now listen to the work, the sacrificial and diligent work of this woman, this wife, this mother. She selects wool and flax, and she works with eager hands. She's like the merchant ships going back and forth to Walmart, bringing her food from afar. Walmart's not in the original text. I added that for those who were wondering. She gets up while it's still night. She provides food for her family in portions for her female servants. She considers a field and she buys it. And out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable and her lamp doesn't go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor. She extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, it snowed here yesterday in May, go figure. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She's clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate when he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies the merchants with sashes. She's clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. I'm tired just reading that. Moms, you astound me. I had the privilege of being raised in a home with an incredible mother. And I'm 41, almost 42. I still can't fathom the amount of tireless work that woman has put in. And now I look at my own wife. We've had 2 foster children in our home, and just the tirelessness and the sacrifice. In light of that, in light of all that they give, how can we not honor our mothers? It's not just something that we have to do, it's something that we should do in light of who and what they are. Consider the love and the care that woman or those women have put into you all the days of your lives, men, women, and kids in the sound of my voice. How can we not recognize and reverence them accordingly? You wouldn't be, in a sense, who you are without your mom. You wouldn't be here without her. So not only this morning do we just have to reverence her, it's something that we should do. And I want to just point out the fact that if you look at Exodus chapter 20, verse 12, there's actually a divine promise associated with it. In other words, we should honor our mother, specifically in this case, in light of achieving the divine promise that God says. Look at what it says in Exodus 20, verse 12. Honor your father and your mother. And it doesn't stop there, it continues. So that you might live long in the land the Lord your God, is giving you. There's a promise there that to the nation that honors its mothers, there's an ongoing promise that God has established. Now, the Apostle Paul picks up on this. Don't turn there, but if you look at Ephesians chapter 6, listen to what he says. Obey your parents, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. Now, he's hearkening back to Exodus 20, verse 12, because he says, this is the first commandment with a promise. And he reaffirms it, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Now, whatever the ramifications of this promise, whether it's national stability or longevity of life, let me give you a reason why you should want to embrace this promise. Because there's a promise associated with it. In my life, I want the blessing of God to be operational. I want him to pour out upon me all that he has for me. And I don't want to miss out on the fullness of this promise due to a failure of showing proper reverence to my mom and to the women in my life who are mothers. So church, I call you this morning, honor your father and mother. Why? Not just because you have to, but because you should. And so that you can access the fullness of this promise. Point number 3, I'm almost done. This is a commandment that we can follow. Not only do we have to, not only should we, but this is something that we absolutely can do. We all have the ability of honoring our mothers. It's something that we can traffic in, we can engage in a sense. We can use our words to honor her. When was the last time you told your mother that you loved her? When was the last time you paused in the midst of just busy, frenzied life and living and spoke to your mother or to the mother of your children and said, I want to say thank you for all that you have done? That's something that you can do. It won't even cost you anything. It's free to use your language to show appreciation and kind regard to that special woman or to those women in your life. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. If you want to sow or invest some life, use that tongue to show appreciation, to give some encouragement, to offer a word of thanks. They have been appointed to, by God in a sense, the most thankless of all tasks. That should not be in a Christian household. Learn to honor your mother with how you speak to her and about her. You can also give her a hug. You can love her physically. You can honor her physically. You were the first person, she was the first person that ever touched you in a sense. The moment you were born, she held you, and likely she held you and tried to kiss you and beyond many times over the course of the years. I'm 41, my mother still tries to hug me. Now and then, I think it's okay to stop and to let it happen. Show your mother some affection and some honor through physical touch. Final point as far as this is concerned, give her some attention. Think over the course of your life and living, potential decades. How many times did she drop everything to just listen to you and give you undivided attention? Because to her, you were worth it. You were worth that time, that listening ear, that compassionate shoulder and beyond. Regardless of her age, whether she's still relatively young or an elder now, can you give her some attention? So can you give her some undivided attention? Can you put the cell phone away in a sense? Can you shut off the television? And can you give her the opportunity to share what's on her heart? That's a beautiful way. If you want to get your mother a gift on this Mother's Day, give her some attention, give her some affection, give her some words. I promise you, she will be very grateful for it. Final point this morning, and I'll move to a very early close, so that you have time to put this into practice on this Mother's Day and spend some time investing in your relationship with her. Not only is it something that we must do and that we should do and that we can do, ultimately is it something that we will do. You know, will relates to a sense of choice. We have a choice in how we respond to the commandment of God. Will we respond appropriately by heeding the wisdom of God and honoring our mothers, or will we act in disobedience, thinking that we know better than Him and operate in a spirit of irreverence? Ultimately, this morning, the choice is each of ours. You know what the answer to these questions should be, and in a sense, must be, and what it can be. But this morning, what will it be? What will it be for you? For each one tuning in, how will you proceed? Will today just be another day, or a day where you dedicate yourself afresh and anew to this promise? And I just conclude with this: may our response to this challenge and invitation mirror what's found in the book of Proverbs. And I read earlier from the book of Proverbs 31, and I want to just conclude with how that particular section of Scripture concludes. Regarding this woman, this wife, this mother of godly character, it says the following: her children rise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And the author concludes with this: honor her, again, hearkening back to Exodus 20 now, honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Proverbs 31, verse 31. That's how it all ends. I want to say as I close to the mothers in the sound of my voice, on behalf of this assembly, its leadership, its ministry heads, the families that I believe I'm speaking on behalf of, thank you sincerely for your work, for your tireless service. You astound us. You amaze us. We see in you the best in the Lord: His love, His mercy, His compassion, His discipline, His faithfulness. All of that is beautifully and wonderfully distilled for us to see in and through you. To my own mother, Betty Foley, it's a privilege and it's a pleasure that you are still with me. I miss my father every day. but I'm happy that you're still in my world. I wish that you were here this morning. Due to social distancing, that was not a possibility. Thank you for giving me life and for making this life a joy. It's been a wonderful time with you, and I'm so grateful for you every day. And to my wife and the mother of my foster children and beyond, who actually is here this morning, I want to say thank you, because I just look at you and I am astounded by what I see. And may the Lord continue to bless you and Betty Foley, all the mothers who tune in. And if your kids and your husbands and beyond do not properly honor you today, let the pastor know, and I'll place a few necessary phone calls. Happy Mother's Day. Lord bless you. Hope to see you again in person very soon. We will continue to monitor what the governor and the government says regarding in-person meetings. More information will come as soon as we have it. In the meantime, continue to avail yourselves of these online services, digital meetings. Check out the church website, newlifebarrie.org, should you wish to learn more about who we are, what we believe. If you want to give, that is the portal and the place to do it. Lord bless you. Lord keep you. Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. Lord, turn his face toward you and give you peace. Thank you for tuning in. God bless you all.